Welcome to another episode of the Business of AI podcast. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Malcolm Buckley from Bright Angles. So Malcolm, welcome to the Business of AI podcast.
Thank you, Tim. Nice to talk to you this morning.
Yeah, great to have you here. And let's kick off by hearing a little bit about your background and how you got into doing what you're doing today at Bright Angles.
Certainly. So I founded Bright Angles in 2024. That was on the back of 26 years in a career in technology and data in the financial sector. So that spreads across, building and operating data centers, tech and organizational transformations, some divestitures, some acquisitions, integrations along the way. And through that time, growing more and more personal focus, I would say, on aspects around sustainability, the energy consumption we were having, the water consumption we were having, and then decarbonisation, net zero, science-based targets. So getting more and more involved in those from a technology perspective. And so in 2024, founded Bright Angles as an independent consultancy to help companies start to control and understand their tech and data impact in a digital world, because quite often it's not thought about as material as buildings and other parts of business operations. But in a digital world, more and more of what businesses do is in that space, and it does have an impact. So let's understand it. And then I guess a couple of things happened. In 2023, there was the ChatGPT moment, where all of a sudden that sprang into life and took all the focus. And I would say over the last 12 months, the conversation has been entirely around, in my space at least, has been around, oh my God, Gen AI is going to burn the world and drink all the water. And so, that becomes a very natural tension in the discussion when you talk about technology infrastructure. And so a couple of things happened. So as well as Bright Angles Consultancy, I co-chair an expert network of sustainability professionals who focus on AI for good, which is the two sides of the coin, using AI in a good way, an intentional way to minimize those sort of risks, but also the good applications of AI where it can be applied as a tool and a technology to big societal or technical challenges. So those things happened, and really start talking about and understanding what agency do we have as people in business, as leaders, as decision makers. What choices can businesses make around benefiting from the promise of AI and doing so in a good, responsible and sustainable way for all sorts of reasons. And hence joining UK AI as the trade body for that business and AI community, to connect with those, leading the experience in the UK, and get involved in developing the thinking and the practices and the lived experience.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's great to get you on board. And that is very much part of our ethos of driving that responsible AI development and looking at being intentional, as you say, about a lot of areas, from the ethics to the sustainability. But I'd love to dive into what you were saying there about the speed of change. And you sort of, you've had a career before AI where you've seen the development of technology and how companies have actually adopted them. And then you've also witnessed the sort of the increased responsibility that businesses, industry have taken broadly for sustainability, driven by some regulations and obviously things like Scope 3, where it's actually now bringing the whole supply chain into the considerations around sustainability. So I imagine, is there a change in pace between what you've seen up until that 2023 moment and what you've seen since that 2023 moment when things have seemed to have accelerated? And how do you cope with that pace of change?
Yeah, really, really important. And I think so absolutely it is that at a technology level, the pace of change is incredible, because you can say something confidently this week and in a month, somebody will have changed, the frontier AIs will have released another capability, or other things will be happening, or other information has come out. So there's definitely, there's an absolute, things are changing quickly that get a lot of publicity and airtime. I think at a business level, there's a bit of a mismatch between the perception of that and, oh my God, every moment we go to sleep, then we're losing ground. And what is really impactful in a business, and what is the right reason to be using AI and the right way to do it is on a fast time frame, but not as critical as it might feel. Maybe until the point that it isn't, and the point that it is. But there's definitely an element of a perception and a broadcast feeling across the tech industry and other industries that we need to have this. It is moving very fast. Legislation is behind, and always will be. That has always been the case in technology. But there are some smart people absolutely thinking about all this stuff, and you can do the responsible and the right thing with your decision making without having to wait to be forced to do it, and you can get ahead of that. And I think the people are this probably comes down to individual company sort of capacity and ethos as well. Is the people are the limiting factor of the speed you can move. You could absolutely go out and buy every newest thing all the time. That will have impact on your business if you do it that way. And some people absorb that differently to others.
Yeah. And just think about it from a sustainability perspective as well, because that's been growing in importance to businesses. You mentioned some of the challenges that are often brought up around AI in particular. So, in a lot of the events that we've had people who said, well, we're really concerned about the impact it's going to have on water usage and on energy consumption, which are valid concerns. But then we've also had other people in the room who have actually got the research that shows in the UK, the data centers that we have here, they are by necessity much more energy efficient because the electricity prices is so high that they've had to learn how to be much more energy efficient. But also with the cooling mechanisms that have been innovated here in the UK, they're just much more energy efficient and water efficient as well. And unfortunately, I think we start to get this sort of bad press because a lot of the data centers in deserts, whether that be in Texas or the Middle East, are able to consume vast amounts of energy because they have solar and they're able to use it. And have to use a lot of water because it is so dry there. But we then get tarnished with the same brush in the UK, even though we're very different. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on those kind of myths which are around there, which kind of change people's perceptions of the AI industry. How do we change those myths, and how do we kind of help people understand what a realistic actual kind of usage of water and electricity is?
No, really, really important point, Tim. You're exactly right. And there are the big headlines come out and in various online and other publications about how good or bad these things are with energy and water. And you're right. What we can do in the UK is the circularity of water cooling systems, which means you lose one Evian bottle full a year, and that kind of thing, as opposed to taking a whole river and warming it up, kind of thing, is absolutely invisible in a lot of cases. Or it only becomes visible if, as a business who's thinking about this, you go into the next layer of detail and go, oh, hang on a sec, I thought that was an idea. I've now done my research, or I've spoken to somebody who has got the research, and you can realize it. But so I think there's always two parts to the studies, you say, busting the myths on this. One is the data. You can, if you have data that you can and share it, data becomes powerful, right? And you can say, look, this is where we operate, this is how those locations operate, and this is how we are using them. So that's, again, being intentional, not just going, I'm going to throw all my processing into OpenAI's hyperscale cloud that I don't really know or care where it is, because then it goes invisible to you. And then the second bit is that's a rational argument that says, here's the data, it says we're good, all good. And that's very good for supporting disclosure reporting and certifications and purpose-driven things like B Corp type certifications, because you can evidence what it is you're doing. There's also the sort of the human, less rational piece, which is you just have to keep calmly saying, yes, I know that's a big scary headline about the data centers in the deserts. That's not how we operate, and you can only get past it by communicate. I think, in my experience, you rarely change people's minds or opinions just by going, here's a graph.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and it's important to have the data there. You
need to have that. That's the credibility and the objective fact backup.
Exactly. And I think that's the word, isn't it? The objectivity. I mean, this is part of what we always try and do in any sort of discussion. It's bring data, because when you bring data, it takes out any of that subjectivity, any of those biases. You have the data there to be able to have that conversation, base that conversation around it. And yeah, so in terms of then the way in which we can use data within to make companies more sustainable, how are you working with companies to help them to gather more data to understand how they can become more sustainable?
So there's good couple of answers to this. So I think in the sort of the simple picture is, and this is again coming back to your question about speed as well. So there is a continually moving set of goalposts around what data you can get from the big AI and cloud providers. They are moving in sometimes a good direction, but they're not necessarily being fully transparent about all of their absolute levels of energy and water consumption, right? So there's an element of you have to take their public information and use it because that's the best anyone apart from them has got. But that's enough to give you potentially a directional view on, okay, should we be using their services or should we be using their services but in a different location, right? There's a big, particularly with AI and data centers, where and when you do certain things with it has a massive impact on the probably still takes the same amount of energy, but the carbon impact of that energy. Okay, so if you move particular processes or timings to different things, it can have a big impact. So one of the things is just kind of shaping that out and working with what people have. It's pretty much technology, once it's into a business, is quite sticky, right? You're not, if I walk up and say, hey, you're using Microsoft, but you should switch to Google because this number's slightly better, that's not a trivial exercise, right? Everything's embedded in their workflow. But what you can do is say, okay, working with what you've got, you can either make that tech transformation like change as if you just had a new procurement cycle, or within what you've got operationally, here's a pragmatic way of changing timings, changing locations, restricting geographies where things happen. So that's one. The second thing is AI gets a lot of companies have the data they need for sustainability management and understanding, but it's distributed and it's all over the place, right? And whereas financial data lives in the finance vertical, if you like, the different parts of sustainability data come from procurement, they come from facilities and buildings management, they come from tech, and they come from the business lines and various things. So depending on the size of your company, that could be multiple different owners of data sets that can inform your things. Now, and the challenge for going back to 2-3 years was always, this is quite hard. There are loads and loads of sustainability software platforms who are aiming to solve that for people. So let's bring this together, make it a SaaS layer that can bring all your data sources together, extract from all these multiple different ownership points. AI can help that because actually some of those things, particularly in the small to medium enterprise space, your purchasing records might be PDF invoices that have been handwritten, right? And so trying to understand your supply chain data means you have to interpret that. And AI can absolutely shortcut that process, whereas going back 2-3 years, that wasn't possible. It was the reason there was no data was there is data, but it's in a very undigitized format. And so to your question, there's 2 or 3 different ways we can approach that when we're talking with companies about what have you got. Starting with what you've got, do you understand what you have, and do you understand who owns all those pieces? Discovery phase. And then there's, okay, some of these are more difficult than others. That is always going to be the case. Which are the most important ones to bring together into your thinking? For me, I think I'm more focused on, have you got the right data at a leadership layer to make the right decisions? And from that, you will get all the reporting and the disclosures that you need, rather than have you got enough data to tick these boxes?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point around at the leadership level. When I've sat on those leadership teams, you want to have a dashboard of some KPIs, but you can't have too many. So how do you decide what the KPI is that brings together all those different aspects of sustainability that you mentioned? And I'm conscious also that what you were saying there was that it's often very fragmented. So you might have lots of different types. And if you're, how do you bring that together into maybe 1 or 2 KPIs that the C-suite, the leadership team can actually analyze and show they're going in the right direction?
Yeah. And that is the hardest question of all. It is can be quite contextual, but exactly as you say, you can't, because they're fragmented. There is a tendency, and certainly a tendency in people who are familiar with data and sort of data savvy, is try and keep everything in. At which point you end up with a air quotes dashboard which has 243 lines that no one ever looks at. Imagine looking at the dashboard on your car and it has more than 5 pieces of information in it. You would crash.
Yeah.
Right? So that ain't a dashboard, that's no good. So that conversation of working out, okay, what is the right KPI to present out of those? There are, there are some, probably the best approach I found is there are 2 or 3 key proxies that help that leadership level, that C-suite level. Changes a little bit with the season of are we very focused on decarbonisation, or are we very focused on cost of energy consumption, or have we got a lot of noise about water consumption? What do we do here, right? So you might occasionally, switch the ones out which are in those dashboards, but probably you would want to have the fundamental. If you've got your energy consumption in there, then you can then either derive that into let's concentrate on the carbon of that, or let's concentrate on the cost of that, or both. It's a natural one to start in with there. The hardest bit in the sustainability space, and I would say more extensively into responsible AI, is the ethical and the societal type metrics. They are the hardest ones to gather and represent in a way that is meaningful to a leadership layer. Ongoing discussion and pretty contextual to each business. Some might have very strong social responsibility agendas, and that becomes front and center. Others might be, we just need to know this is happening. Okay, you've got to make a very local judgment call on, okay, this is all you need in your dashboard, and it tells you whether you're healthy a layer below.
Yeah, no, and I think it is a continual challenge, isn't it? But it's going to be very specific to the sector, very specific to the individual company and the leadership team, how they surface that data to be able to measure their broader social impact. But I want to also sort of understand a little bit about how much you think people understand what sustainability is within the organization. Because, again, I'm sort of thinking around that management team, or maybe just managers more generally. If you're surfacing data that says the company's sustainability score is X and we want to move it to Y, you've got to understand what you can do as an individual within your team or in your department to be able to contribute to that. So in order to be able to contribute, you need to understand what levers you can pull and how to do that. So what's your sense of how much people understand at the moment in order to be able to affect that change?
So I think there's a little bit of, depending on the size and scale of the company, I think there is a bit of a disconnect sometimes, because exactly as you said, at the sort of leadership level, you're working with a small number of data points, because that's how dashboards are effective, which don't necessarily feel like what is it like when I communicate this down to my teams, how they know what it is they can do. The art, I suppose, of leadership and management is making that translation for them and doing it. But the sort of not forgotten part of this, the other part of this is that there is more and more of our workforces are conscious of these things as personal individuals, right? They do care about these things if given the chance. And if you can mobilize, not just a sustainability team who puts something on everyone's desk once a week, a year, but is bringing these things to the fore, whether that is local action or whether that is trumpeting things that aren't necessarily like direct to people, but something that they will feel. One of the things I learned when I was at London Stock Exchange Group, I was the tech representative on the sustainability committee, at which point I met all these other sustainability reps in other parts of the business that were invisible to me. And the guys in building and facility services had done this amazing thing. They said, well, we did 2 really simple things. We turned up the fridges in all of the offices by 2 degrees. So they were at 3.5 degrees instead of 1 degree. 3.5 is food safe. It's all good. And then we went to all of the boilers and in all of the offices, and we turned it down from the factory default of 70 degrees C to 67, which is listeria safe. And we've saved like tens of thousands of pounds a year and this much energy per year because we aren't running those things. Now, people don't necessarily feel that. It's utterly invisible to them because they still have to dilute the water when they wash their hands, and their sandwiches are still okay at lunchtime, right? But if you make there's an absolute art to the storytelling and the communication, which makes people, those things are in people's environments, and people, particularly in an office environment. So I do go to the fridge every day. I do go and wash my hands, and this kind of thing. And so that touches a bit more closely, because a lot of people aren't in a procurement decision making point, around who we're buying things from, but they might, you can engage them in service. We want to make, we're going to renew our providers of coffee, let's see who we want to choose. But most people don't have that, but they can feel they're doing something and feel part of the general positive movement in their environment, their immediate, off their immediate space. I think is really important.
Yeah, and it's becoming an increasingly important within organizations, because people are asking those questions, what are you doing? And they're signing up to be on, whether it be committees or groups that are invested in this. So I think both from a commercial perspective, as you've outlined, there are savings, but there's also this sort of public mood to want companies to be more responsible. And so the leadership team have to sort of react.
And I think you can it's easy to underestimate that, or assume that it's going to be hard to get people to sign up. And I've never met and spoken with a company that said, we tried to do that and nobody signed up. They've always had people putting their hands up going, yeah, I want to be able to get involved in this alongside my day job tasks, and be part of that. So I think we have to have faith in people as well a little bit.
Yeah, and without wanting to get political on this, what I'm seeing at the moment outside of the Southeast is that there is a lot of skepticism around the net zero goals, and it has become quite polarized between people saying we've got to have net zero at all costs, and then other people are saying let's just rip up net zero completely and get rid of it. And I'm not saying that's how it is across all of the country, but I certainly hear that voice louder in some parts of the country, and certainly in certain areas. How do you think we sort of address that? And is that your experience as well? What I'm hoping is that we can start to find a sort of middle ground there somehow.
No, absolutely. So I think you're right. There is the way the discussion is, and those sort of terms have been weaponized, for want of a better expression, by either side, right? You either must have it or it is killing us, one way or the other, whichever side of that argument you're on. And as always, the reality is somewhere in the middle, and getting past that initial reaction is I think the key, because we as businesses and as individuals have agency, right? The choices we make to do things, you can do things multiple ways. I think one of the hardest bits of the storytelling is changing that false dichotomy that this is a binary thing, and they're in opposite directions, right? If you do things in a frugal, low energy, sustainable way, it is also an economic benefit, is missing, is the real middle ground, right? And this is one of those examples, going back to our earlier point, right? This is the thing where you can put all the data in the world you like in front of people, and that is not, after a point, that doesn't change their mind, right? The overarching sort of polarization of that debate has happened, and so it's like I can't put just another piece of data in front of you and say, well, now do you believe me, kind of thing. But it's a time factor that it's not a one and done. It is continuous, communicate in all sorts of ways, and then coming back to trumpeting the successes, right? Here is an example where a company has done this thing this way, and look, not only did it, increase their productivity or their revenue or whatever, they were able to do it in this way. This has also brought these other benefits, and it dilutes that polarization. It undermines it somewhat. And I think the more you can do that, or we can do that, and that is. It's one of the softer parts of the conversations I have with companies, is how do you tell the story? It's great that you can have a victory and it goes on the balance sheet and it goes on your sustainability report. How do you make people see it? And that can be, it's a big part of the challenge. But I think that's, to your point, that's finding that middle ground of, okay, let's get beyond the polarized statement, like bold statements, and get into the options. Where do we have agency? What can we do something about? And what do we care about? Yeah. If you're a North Sea company based in the energy utilities industry, probably you have some very linear financial drivers for what you want to do, and decarbonisation is not one of those.
Just going back to your earlier point there, I think it's combining data, which we said was really valuable in terms of being objective and being able to sort of bring that that sort of ability to make decisions based upon data, and then combining that with the story that you were talking about then, in terms of, it's actually not just a nice to have, or it's not even like a fluffy kind of woke kind of argument. It's actually, there's a commercial benefit here that actually, if you do this, not only are you going to be able to save the cost, and you gave some great examples earlier in terms of turning down those dials and saving thousands of pounds, but also it attracts more people to your company, because people want to work for companies that share the values that they have. So it's got that commercial benefit, but also increasingly in that marketplace, consumers are choosing companies that have those values. I wanted to kind of extend that a little bit and get your thoughts on how we extend that concept across the UK as a whole. Across the UK in the world. So, one of the areas that we're really interested in is where the UK can lead, and taking a lot of the conversations we've had here around what sustainability in practice means, how can we package that up into a bit of an export opportunity for the UK to other countries?
Really, really good point. And I think, you're right. So I think there is a really good opportunity in what UKI are doing and have been leading discussions in around the sovereign approach to AI, right? I think there's a massive amount of overlap in the way to think about those connected systems of, we need our data and our technology capability to be under our control. And we want it to, and in order for it to be under our control, we need to be able to power it, and we need to be able to cool it, so we can solve these problems collectively, or solve these challenges, or apply solutions that already exist in a smart way, so that we achieve all of those things. And that then gives a worked example for other nations. Oh, we also have a sovereign capability requirement, whether or an AI sovereignty, or data sovereignty on residents, or we just want energy resilience. We don't want to be dependent on all the energy we're pulling in over gas pipes from wherever. So all of those things start to add virtuously up by thinking that none of these are independent systems, but we sometimes get caught trying to solve just the problem A, when if you connect B, C, D, and E, they all move together and in the right direction. And I think that's how that feels to me like a sweet spot, if you like, because if we can get that right around, there is absolutely a big investment and industry transformation around AI that is driving some questions around energy and water and sustainability more broadly. And we have a society, and laws are about privacy and all of those things we want to keep control of around, and you can build that into a working model that says, these are the things we considered, and this is how we've delivered it for the UK. That becomes very leadershipy to me.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for the UK, definitely. Just as we're wrapping things up now, because it's been fascinating. We've talked about so many different aspects.
We have covered a lot of ground
to actually put sustainability into practice. I wanted to just go back quickly, because whilst I've got you here, I wanted to understand that data we were talking about before, in terms of when you are a company and you were looking at how you can improve your sustainability metrics, you want to understand your supply chain. We talked a little bit about Scope 3, and obviously that's one of the main mechanisms that now requires companies to understand all of their supply chain and take responsibility for that. One significant area where most companies are now using a lot of energy is through data centers. I wanted to get your thoughts on how much data is coming from data centers that companies can use when they are trying to sort of understand what their full supply chain is. Is there enough data? Is it getting better?
So there isn't enough. It is getting better, I suppose, would be the summary to that. If you're using the large scale, there's kind of layers of the universe. You've got data center providers, and if you have a direct contract with one of those guys, you probably do have pretty granular data on your exact energy consumption on the basis that they bill you for that. Where it gets interesting is when you're looking at the hyperscalers, whether that's AWS or Google or whatever, there's a level of abstraction applied, right? So they will bill you down to the minute, possibly the second, right, for your consumption. But then what they will give you in terms of sustainability data for your energy consumption and their carbon footprint of it is an average figure. They'll use a regional or a regional average figure. and they won't give you an absolute number of things. Now, it's complicated. You know, there are many reasons why every single processing step isn't measured all the way, you know, through your chain, but you get to a directional number. I think, as I said, it's getting better. There's pressure being put on those providers. They have their public statements about how great they're going to be for renewable energy or not. Pretty much all of them have stepped back from their previously published net zero target dates because of AI, which they are driving. You know, they're driving build out of massive AI models and saying this is going to use all the energy. So, you know, AWS, Google, Microsoft, etc., have all quietly wound back their targets without replacing them with a subsequent one yet, to my knowledge. But in terms of a company using that as a utility, if you like, you can get directional data, and you can get some data from all of them, and you should be getting it. If even down, as well as down for your data center use, but also your Office suite or your Google Workspace type usage will have a dashboard for it somewhere. It's in there somewhere if somebody knows to go and look for it. You won't get an absolutely perfect to the atom data point on exactly how much energy you're using and exactly how much carbon that creates, but it is good enough to give you a direction of, okay, is this something we should pull a lever on and move or shift because it is significant, or okay, we don't need to worry about that because it is not zero, but it's small enough. So I think, coming from a background of technology and data people, there's sometimes a tendency to always waiting, oh, we could just get a bit more data, we'd be able to know exactly. And you need to be able to take imperfect data and get directional decision and insight from it before you've measured everything down to the last atom.
And I think what I'm hopeful for, certainly from the conversations that we've been having, and you've been in some of those where we've had a lot of data centers in the room, is that they do see the importance of sharing more data, industry-wide data, to be able to show how they are actually managing and both through efficiency and more productivity, managing and lowering the amount of energy which is being used. And it's important to bring all of that data together, as we were saying at the beginning, to bust some of those myths around how.
Absolutely.
So hopefully,
no, you're right. I'm very heartened by what I'm hearing from those guys, and I think they've realised that if it's becoming the market expectation that data is provided, and if you don't get it from them, you're going to get your data centers services from someone else who can provide you that data, because you have to report on your supply chain.
Yeah. And again, it's that sort of market pressure. It's consumers, in this case, businesses, consumers driving competitive decisions, and the companies having to respond by being more transparent around their energy usage. We're going to have to start to wrap things up, Malcolm. It's been fascinating to get so much information from you. Thank you so much. How can we keep in touch with Bright Angles and find out more about what you're working on?
So brightanglesLimited.com is the website. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Well, occasionally active, not overactive, not oversharing as well. So feel free to contact me directly on that. But yes, I'm personally going to, get involved in the UK AI events as well. So if people see me there in the community, really happy to talk to people. And they're probably the best ways.
Brilliant, thank you. And one last thing that you're really excited about as you look ahead to 2026, is there, particularly in your field of sustainability, what's the one thing that excites you most?
Oh, good question. So I think there is, coming back to, it's probably something I said, is that despite all the geopolitics and the pressure and the polarization, whatever, the thing that excites me most is that hearing the success stories and the fact that people are doing stuff and that smart people are doing good stuff when you look for it, always makes me very happy and optimistic, and thinks that we are a smart species. We've got, yes, this is one of those moments where, to borrow a phrase, AI is neither positive or negative, nor is it neutral, right? We are the lucky generation that are in the room as the adults making the decisions that will influence what happens over the next 2 to 15 years of AI future. And I think, that's, we should stand up for that, and fill our boots. And I keep finding examples, and what I'm optimistic and excited about is that I do keep finding them, and I don't find people getting fatigued and despondent about things. I find them going, well, I can do something about this, or I can't control that, but I can control this, and so I will. And that really gives me a great hope.
Yeah, That was really well put. Thank you, Malcolm. I think that is a reason to be optimistic, being able to find those stories. And as you've outlined very well in this episode, that there's an opportunity for AI to deliver a lot of good if we, as the businesses, take that responsibility for being both sustainable and ethical. And yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there. So, Malcolm, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.